You are listening to School of Talk. We are creating a world where every child experiences the power of a great teacher. We believe education is the answer. It has the power to conduct change, improve lives, unlock ideas, create opportunities, and build connections. It's the single greatest investment we can make today to create a better tomorrow. That's why we're on a mission to train, inform, and inspire educators around the world. Each week, we dive into a topic related to education, teaching, and learning. Whether you're an educator by trade or an educator by spirit, we've got something for you. Open up your mind and get ready to soak in some new learning. Class is in session.
Okay, welcome back to the podcast. Thrilled to have join us Adrian from all the way in Mexico. Hi, Adrian. How are you doing?
Hi there, Ryan. I'm fine. Thank you very much. It's pleased to be talking with you again.
Fantastic. And obviously, you've been in Mexico a long time in your career. A good starting point would be to describe how you started as a teacher in Mexico and now, obviously, as a leadership role as well.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, to be honest, I've been here a long time. I arrived in 1990. Seems it's incredible. It's half my life or more actually here in Mexico. And yes, I started, I was always a geography teacher. That's really what I was. But when you go abroad and you're teaching, it's very easy to fall into becoming an English teacher. And so I started doing that as well and really loved that. But I've worked in language institutes, various private schools here in Querétaro in Mexico, and a couple of universities as well. Yeah, I've been working a fair time in different places. And I found that the experience in all of those places was very different. And I must admit, it's 25 years ago, I was talking with an old colleague, and he actually said, you should try this school, the American School of John F. Kennedy American School. He said, it's different. And I went there, and I guess my prior experience with everywhere else was very much financial based and decisions on making money. And I just fell into this school where everybody seemed to be loving education. And that's why I'm still here 25 years later. But I was the teacher, and I became a high school principal. And then after high school principal, I managed to find myself here as the general director. So I'm the head of school now.
And was
That's
Mexico
really,
your first move abroad from the UK?
yes, it was. It was the first country I came to. I'd been here before on holiday. And to be quite honest, a lot of people say that, or there's an old saying from somewhere that once the dust of Mexico has been on your boots, you'll never find peace in another land. And I remember hearing that before I came over here, and I'd been here on holiday, and there was just something so special about this country. It really is. And yeah, I guess I've never found peace anywhere else, and I haven't wanted to return to rainy London since. So I'm still here.
Fantastic. And you mentioned, obviously, you're at an American curricular school. And I know from our perspective at Teachaway, we have a lot of British candidates in the network that might be put off applying to an American school because they think I'm not American. So what's your experience been as a Brit at an American school? And what can you say to candidates that might be thinking that ahead of applying to such a school?
I see absolutely no problem at all. There's a little bit of change in nomenclature. I'm a superintendent or head of school as opposed to a head or something, like principals instead of masters or something, whatever that kind of phrasing is. But honestly, at the end of the day, a genuine educator connects with the kids and helps them grow. And that's what it's all about. So there's very little difference in truth on a day-to-day basis. You just have to get used to understanding what a middle school is or a high school and things like that. But no, don't worry. We've got several Brits over here at the moment. We've got people from Canada. We've got people from England, from South Africa, from Poland, across Europe. We've got a lot of people here teaching as well. And nobody has any problems. It's not a complex thing to get into that system.
Great. And you've obviously said that you've been there for 34 years. So I guess you've seen a lot change, both in terms of education in Mexico and Mexico generally. What are those biggest changes that you've seen over your time there?
Mexico has really moved forward itself politically or whatever. But when I got here, it was very isolated in many ways. It was small town thinking. And Mexico opened its eyes and it began free trade with the United States. And that really opened a lot of things. And so I think what's really happened a lot with that is the growth of technology going along with the growth in the country. So the realization that to be part of the big world, you need English, whether that's politically correct to say or not, but it is what's needed. And Mexico has got a lot of international companies here, and they're not going to recruit you unless you're speaking English. So there were always local schools that said they were bilingual, but these international schools, and we were the first here in this city, as an American school, we've got 60 years here in the city. The English program really is very effective, and that's making a huge difference for the children here in Mexico. So I think that growth really came out of the growth of the country, the economic change, the changes in the world. That's really opened up Mexico, and that's really where Mexico is going. And English is really the driving force, I think, behind the international schools.
Great. And do you think, in terms of the schools themselves, a lot of the growth in the schools, from what you can see at your specific school, has it been a lot of expats flooding the schools, or is it more that there's a growing middle class and more Mexican parents are able to afford to send their kids to a private school?
Yes, there's a bit of both there, but it is mainly the growth in the middle classes, the realization that these schools can bring in teachers that are certified from elsewhere. Maybe the Mexican certification program isn't as strict or as complicated, and people are working in local schools really with very little training in pedagogy or anything. So we offer a very different model for that. There is an increase in expats. That's a big growth. A lot of the industry here is the car industry and the technology industry. And all of those directors, all of those employees want their children in schools that give them an equivalent education so that they can leave the country and go somewhere else. But the growth in the middle classes is really the powerhouse behind that. We've got 32 nationalities of children on campus. It's a wonderful feeling on a daily basis. And there's so much fun that goes with talking with kids from Japan and China and Korea and the US and the UK. And everything is just so nice like that. It really adds a different dimension to education. But while I'm saying that, still about 75% of the kids are still Mexicans, and they're from the local background. So we certainly don't forget the local culture, and that's very enriching for all of us too.
That's great, because we speak to a lot of schools, and the split between expatriate students and local students is massively in favor of the expatriates. So it's nice to see that you've still got that Mexico feel, and that you've got a big pool of students from Mexico flooding the schools. And even in the last 2 or 3 years, have you seen a lot change in terms of more Mexican students in international schools, or has it been more of a gradual thing over the last decade or so?
As a school, we're trying not to really grow anymore, to be quite honest, because we've got a lovely field. People know the students and teachers by name. We're 1,400 students, so that sounds quite a lot, but we're 300 staff. But we don't want to grow anymore. So we're not looking for growth. We're looking for growth in quality, not growth in numbers. But yes, in the local dynamics there, obviously with COVID, we lost all of the foreign kids went home. And I guess we got through COVID a lot stronger than a lot of other international schools, simply because most of the students were Mexican in the first place. So they just came back to school or carried on. But yeah, it's the growth in the local population, I think, is really what's keeping it going there. And it is an interesting mix, and I do understand a lot of schools have a real division. But some of the most successful of these international schools are those that genuinely try and blend everybody together. People talk about being multinational, and then they want to divide everybody. Or you've got the English program, and then you've got the Mexican program. And where does that come from? How are you really learning and enriching life? If you really want a multicultural experience, everybody needs to be together and doing the same thing. And that's the model that we operate here. And we like that for the staff as well as for the kids.
And you mentioned the staff there, is that diversity reflected in the staff as well? You mentioned, 30 different nationalities. In terms of your international teachers, are they coming from all around the world, or do you mainly recruit from specific nationalities?
Yeah, we haven't got as many, but we've got people. We generally try and recruit from the United States and Canada. Is where we go for the job fairs. That's the main thing, because we are an American school and we go it a little bit to that basis. But the way things are now with recruitment, you can click on our website and you can apply for a job straight away with me, and somebody will be talking to you within 24 hours. We use people like Teacher Aid, quite obviously, as well, that are finding teachers. And so these people come from all over. And there's a Brit heading up an American school. That's clear. The high school principal at the moment is another Brit. So we've got a lot there, but we've got Polish teachers, as I say, South Africans, We had a couple of Jamaicans that have just left, but they come from anywhere really that is genuinely interested. What we're looking for, Ryan, is people that sincerely want to educate children, that they want to grow in their profession. They care about education. The worst thing you can do is send me an email saying, I'm looking to give classes. Do you have any vacancies? Because nobody gives classes here. We're helping children grow and mature and become the best people they can. And so those people come from all over the world, all walks of life, and everybody's welcome.
And why do you think Mexico is such an attractive destination? You say you've got applications from all around the world. From your experience interviewing candidates and then screening them and ultimately getting them into your school, what do you think the biggest draws are to come to Mexico?
Okay, the standard phrase we always seem to use or always seem to hear is that if you want to earn a lot of money, go to the Middle East. And if you want a life, go to Mexico. And there's something special about Mexico. You've been here a lot. You appreciate that. There's something there, whether it's the people, the weather, the food, the culture. I don't know. There's something incredibly open. Foreigners are very welcome here. And that's almost unfair, but there's a level of respect given to us because it's just wonderful seeing the kids. They're already asking me now who their new teachers are going to be next year and in August. And they're all looking forward to meeting these new people and where are they from. And there's something very welcoming about Mexico. But it's not just that as well. That it's a lot cheaper than other countries. And that's something I've always said to people. You don't look at the salary, ask about the purchasing power.
Yeah.
Ask what you can do with your money. Because I certainly live a lot better, and I always did as a teacher, than I ever did in England. There's things like that are very different. In Mexico, there's a lot of ways the life is a lot different, and people take life very happily. And that's really part of the draw, I think, for Mexico. But also for teachers, because of this credit that people give to the training programs that we get in other countries and all of that, it means we're a lot more able to be creative. I remember sitting down right near the beginning of my time here as a teacher, and I was just one of many new ones at the time, and just saying to the head of department, I really think we can look at this English program and see what we can do to make this a little bit more 21st century or 20th century, whatever it was. That was so long ago. And it was so easy to find ways to put my heart and my soul and my background and things into developing a completely different program. And it's not that I'm a superstar, it's just that I'd seen it somewhere else. And that was so enriching for the country here. Now we're an IB program, so we've got all of that lined up. But people are able to do things here that you can't do back home or in the United States. And if we stick there to the United States, we don't have a district office. I'm the head of school and that's it. If you've got an idea, you just come in here and you sit down and you tell me about it. I don't need approval from anywhere else. We may need to cost it in and do the rest of that stuff, but it's an opportunity for people to grow and to develop. I've got total control over the professional development budget, and which is really big because the school's owned by the parents and they want the better teachers. We're offering master's degrees. We're offering teaching certificates through the US as you program. And teachers come in and they say, okay, I want to be here for 4 or 5 years. What can you do to make me a better teacher? And to walk out of here 4 or 5 years later with a master's degree is something that really helps you in your career. And that's the kind of thing that you can get very easily working in a school like ours. We're not the only school doing that, but in Mexico, it does a lot of those things because that's the model that's being created. And it's a way for us to put the work on top, to give people the best chances.
Exactly. And just referring back to your cost of living point, I think that's vitally important. You mentioned the Middle East being a really attractive destination for a lot of candidates because of the salaries on offer. But and I've been over to the Middle East. You end up doing jet ski at the weekend. That's 200 quid. Eating out, that's restaurants. That's another 100 quid. All of a sudden, the cost of living there is massive. Whereas in Mexico, as you rightly said, particularly in cities such as the one where your school is, very cheap, and you can have lots of fun on a very low budget. And then once you balance that with the salary packets that you are getting, and don't get me wrong, obviously Teachaway works with lots of schools around the world, and Mexico's salary package, certainly in the last 3 years, definitely competitive to a lot of the other destinations that candidates are looking at. And the candidates certainly shouldn't be put off just by looking at the individual salary. I think that's a really strong point that more candidates need to realize.
Yeah, I think so. And there are websites, I don't know the name of any off the top of my head, but there are websites where you can put in comparative cost of living and really the spending power. So you can say, okay, I'm from London. I want to know what I can do with £100 and what I can do in Mexico City, what I can do in Querétaro, or what I can do in Istanbul. And you can do that, and then you can see the kind of difference. But yes, if I throw out there quite easily that you can go anywhere in this city in a taxi for $3, three
Mm.
US dollars or £2 something or whatever that is in English money. So wherever you want to go in your social life, literally you can jump in a taxi and spend hardly anything. So things like that are very, very easy. You can eat for £5 or £10. You can have a great meal out. Things like that make life very different. You don't need the same kind of money as you may need in other countries.
For sure. And I guess each city in Mexico is slightly different as well. A lot
Oh,
of
yeah.
candidates will think of Mexico City naturally because it's the capital and there's obviously a lot of international schools there. But you're in Querétaro and there's other places like Tampico, Monterrey, areas in around Cancun that obviously offer a very good lifestyle as well. What is it about the city that you're in that attracted you initially and that you've enjoyed so much that you've been there for 34 years?
You know, one thing I still really love, Ryan, honestly, is on a Friday night when I leave school, I go downtown and I'm going into a 16th, 17th century colonial city that hasn't changed because it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And I find myself a cafe somewhere and I'm sitting on the side of the street on a square there in the sunshine. And there's always a friend or two that will walk in because it's what we do. And it's after school on a Friday. It's always happy. It's never bad weather. Things like that make such a huge difference. I finish school at 2:30 in the afternoon, which is lunchtime in Mexico. So when you get used to having lunch at 2:30, I could say as a head of school, I got a morning job. And that's the truth. So I can go out for lunch and meet people from all other walks of lives and other English and other Americans, whatever. And they're all downtown, just walking around the cafes, looking for somebody else they know, and we'll sit down and have a beer or have something to eat or whatever. And that's something that is so special to me. I don't know whether that's the full answer to why I like Querétaro, but that says something about the kind of place that this is. And that old style Mexico is still there. And yet Costco is around the corner and Walmart and all the rest of it. That's all here as well. The cinemas, the films are in English. That costs about £3 now, I think, entry to the cinema, about $3 or $4. It's nothing to have that kind of a lifestyle here, but the old Mexico is still just down the road, and sooner or later somebody's going to be doing a dance to a rain god or something in a beautiful ancient costume, and you're going to learn something about all of that stuff too. So there's something about that pace of life that really competes with getting on a train in London for a 2-hour commute in the rain that I came away from.
That sounds great. And I'm sure a lot of applicants considering Mexico will be putting up in their heads, okay, 2:30 on a Friday and we're there in Square.
Don't quote me on one, but there we go. But that's the truth. Yeah.
That's great. And you mentioned obviously you invest a lot in the professional development of staff, which is vitally important. We see a lot of schools that don't do that sort of thing. We always tell schools when we are speaking to them about recruitment, it's one thing having an efficient and effective recruitment strategy. But if you don't have a good retention strategy, then it's always a vicious circle because you're recruiting, and then they're only staying for a year, 2 years. Whereas you mentioned quite a lot of your teachers stay for 4 or 5 years, or in some cases, as yourself, 34 years. What exactly in terms of how you're promoting your school and when you're speaking to applicants, how much do you tell them at the first stage in terms of how you're going to invest in their professional development? And is it something that candidates are frequently asking whether you offer it?
I think more candidates should ask. There's always that little bit of a balance there in those interviews and everything, Ryan, to not try and persuade somebody to come simply because you're going to give them basically a master's degree almost free. I charge, it's a token gesture, literally, that we charge for that. But so we want to be very careful with that. And we like to find out that somebody's the right kind of a teacher for us first. So, but those offers are always there on the table. I guess what I would say to candidates really is you've got to ask. And an awful lot of candidates, from my perspective, they're looking for work not in a serious enough way. And I think that's something that can help, because the worst thing in the world for a candidate or for me is to agree that you're coming down because we smiled at each other and you like the sunsets and everything seems cool. And I can talk about 2:30 on a Friday and go into a square, and they come down and then they don't really either teach seriously or that they can't really stand life in another country. Life in another country is not the same as an extended vacation. You've got the reality. Mexico is a country with its own issues and its own problems. A lot of those violence and everything we certainly don't see in Querétaro. but it's got its issues there, and you're not at home, and your rights and privileges and everything else that relate to your own country is not the same as where you go. And I think some candidates are not really thinking clear enough. But there's plenty of people around here. There's the guy, the elementary principal joined the same day as I did, and he's
Oh, wow.
still here, so there's a lot of us like that. You were talking actually about the turnover there. The average time, the longevity of a teacher here is 6.2 years at
Wow,
the
that's
moment.
great.
So that's where we are. And a lot of that is because of these master's degrees and the teaching certificates and those programs, but it's also IB training. We need to do this to retain people because we do believe that people that do well are people we want to keep. And it's a community feel. As I say, we've got no owners in this school. It's a strange setup. It was set up by a company 60 years ago, and then the company walked out and the school was suddenly here. And there were 42 families or something at the time. And we haven't got any owners. There is no ownership of this school. It's a group of parents that hire a general director and then they leave me to run the school. And that's the way we operate. How we've grown to where we are. But I think for candidates, they need to be very careful. They need to ask the right questions when they're looking for work. One of the big things is in the names of schools. And I don't want to quote any school names around here, but there's plenty of schools that choose names that make it look like they could be a foreign school or somehow tied to different programs. And you just got to ask, what's your accreditation? And you'll find out it's just a name. There's absolutely nothing behind it. And some of those schools are not necessarily following any kind of programs that you would really keep a foreign educator actually interested.
You mentioned there that recently an IB school, or a part of your curriculum is the IB. We had Louisa Catalan on another episode of
Okay.
a few weeks ago. Why is it, and we discussed with her the growth of IB, why it's so attractive, and it'd be quite handy from your perspective. Why was it that you chose the IB as the curriculum that you wanted to help grow the school? And what is it exactly about the IB that you think gets it right for both the teachers teaching it and also the students themselves?
Yeah, I think the structure of the program, just the whole focus on critical thinking and everything else really stands it apart from, especially from local programs. But if you ask me what's the big benefit here, is if you want to go to London University or to Rice or somewhere else and you say you've got a 9 in Adrian's English class in the middle of Mexico, it doesn't really say much. But if you can say I've got an IB diploma, bilingual diploma, and the average score on there was 6, or I got a 28 points or 32 points, it says something, and those different universities, they understand what that means internationally. And that's the way that we can show our students are really out there on an international stand. And it's only by giving them the same programs that the other countries can compare them to. And we do. We have students going all around the world, and that's how they do that with those kind of standards. It's great for the teachers because there is a structured program there and there's a lot of learning and a lot of training going on behind that. And it gives them access to schools that actually care about education, not just about making money as well. That's the big thing there, I think, for a teacher as well. It is a structured program where their creativity is very welcome, but it means there's some serious learning going on there for the teachers and students.
And if I'm a potential applicant to your school and I'm wanting to apply to your IB position, for example, and I don't have any experience in the IB curriculum or a qualification in the IB, would I be totally disregarded, or would you still consider those?
No, I would absolutely consider you and what you've done and your experience and your genuine interest in that. And I get a lot of candidates like that. That's okay. We put them through the IB training. So
Right.
you get trained in the very first year you're here. As soon as we can put you in that training, you get it. And we do our own similar IB type training courses that are completely unofficial, but we do that internally. We have one day every month as school closes down, the kids are not in the school, and we have a day of professional development. So every month we do that. We're training people in IB and also in different standards in teacher engagement activities and whatever else we're doing. We do that every month. And on top of that, we have this program where all of the training is required for IB. So we train the people there. And we've got another program. There's actually a committee that sits every month to take on board applications. So on our website, if you were a member of staff, you would find there's a place where you can apply for training. So you can say, look, I came here, like you're saying, I don't know about the IB. It looks good. I saw it on the website. I've got no training. At the moment, I'm pretty good at English, but I want to be teaching something else and I really want to develop there and I really want to understand a certain area of training. Then you can do that. And people are doing master's degrees that we're funding for them, or part funding, or giving them the time, and master's degrees, the licenciaturas, or sorry, first degrees, undergraduate courses, as well as everything else, and going to conferences. So you have to apply. You've got to have a good program. And there's nothing better for me than somebody that's already mapping out his life as an educator and what he wants to do. And then we'll help fund that process. And hopefully you'll stay a few years along the way and we'll all learn together. It's the way that works.
That's fantastic to hear from a school that placed so much emphasis on each individual teacher, whether they're new, straight thrown into the qualifications. That's amazing. So linking more towards you as a leader now, obviously you're a principal of the school, you've made the journey from geography teacher all the way through the ranks. What's your best advice for any sort of experienced teacher, or indeed anyone that has gone into school administration, in terms of growing into potentially becoming a principal or director of a school?
I've always said you've got to try and be good at the next level. You've got to show yourself. As a teacher needs to start showing leadership potential there, just beyond doing what he's doing in the classroom. A lot of the teachers here that have succeeded like that are people that really embrace the idea of the extracurricular activities. You know, they get involved in student council or Model United Nations, or I don't know, even if it's helping train the basketball team or whatever it is, that they're trying to do more than just what they're doing in the classroom. A lot of them want to train in, well, there's different systems available, but we do a lot of accreditations in different forms of teaching and in discipline, for example, and in anti-bullying and in child protection. So there's a lot of people that say they're seriously interested in supporting the school in these kind of directions. So if they are, and if it's a good fit, then we'll train them up in those areas. And they're normally the people that move forward in the school. There is a lot of opportunities. All of our leadership team, we're all foreigners, one way or another, and that almost sounds bad. I feel it's perhaps not politically correct to say that. It's not by intention of the school, because we've had plenty of other Mexicans in charge of the school before, and it's certainly not me picking foreigners. It's just that those people have risen through the ranks by taking on board these opportunities. The school gave me 2 master's degrees. I worked hard for those, but I did 2 master's degrees while I was here in order to get where I am. And do you know what I mean? And there's a lot of people around that have done the same thing. So I think, honestly, for all of your candidates out there, I say, please do your research carefully. Look carefully at what the school is offering. Think about it. Don't think about the salary. Think about the spending power, what that means, the standard of living you're going to get. Stress levels are not the same, but it's a serious place. And schools like this are really interested in genuine educators. As I say, it's not giving classes, but there's always room for growth. We believe it's better to bring people up through the ranks than look for people outside. None of us came in at our level from outside the school. We've all come through the ranks. But that's what you get when you've got a real community-based school where everybody knows and likes each other, and we have to relate to the kids and the parents. It's a beautiful experience. It's very different from back home. I don't know Manchester, but I had Manchester to London, I'm sure. It's a very different environment.
Yeah, great. Adrian, that's fantastic. I think you've done a really good job there, not just showcasing Mexico as a whole, but also it shows that there are schools out there that really do value passionate educators and give them the platform to grow, as yourself has done in your career. So really, thanks for your time. Final question from me is just more of a future outlook, both in terms of Mexico as a country, but also the education in Mexico. We see sometimes in the PISA rankings and other things like that, obviously more related to state schools, Mexico underperforming when compared to other countries. Where do you think education in Mexico is heading? And certainly on an international school level, do you foresee more and more international schools being built in Mexico?
Yes, I think generally speaking, the state system here is not very good. So anybody in the middle classes and up are aspiring to put their children into these schools. I've heard the latest statistic, and I may be slightly wrong, but about 60% of children in Mexico are now in some kind of an international or a private school. The biggest growth within those private schools is definitely the international schools. And the driving force of that is things like IB, a solid English program to help kids understand how they can move out there into the world. I think the future is very good. There's a lot of companies here now buying up schools, Mexican schools. They've realized there's a big market of incredible schools here, and we're just beginning to be seen on the scene. Mexico is moving, and it's a great place to be.
Fantastic. Yeah, and I can echo that. The first time I went to Mexico was for an education conference about 2.5 years ago, and I've been lucky enough to go a few times since then. And every time I go, the different cities, it really very different to what you have in your image about Mexico prior to going there. Obviously, you mentioned some of the push factors. Occasionally, as you hear the safety concerns and things like that. But there's so many great things about Mexico, and it's great that the economy is improving, the middle class is growing. Ultimately, that's going to have a knock-on effect into the level of education as well. Great, Adrian. Thanks for your time. I know you're a busy chap, but I'll see you probably in September at the Tri Association conference.
So yes, that would be good to see you again. Thank you so much for your time there. And honestly, just a plug for the school. It's the John F. Kennedy School in Querétaro. You can go on the website and send a curriculum, or you can send it straight through to me. You'll see my ugly face there on the website. I'm very happy to look at anything and everyone that's interested in coming here and becoming a passionate educator with us.
Thank you for listening to this episode of School of Talk. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure you subscribe to the podcast. If you loved today's episode, share this out with a friend. Class is dismissed.